Rain hammered against the massive glass windows of Gertrude Hunt's Connecticut mansion when the doorbell rang at 11:43 p.m. She almost ignored it. Travis was in Manhattan working late again, and she had already cried herself numb in the kitchen an hour earlier. But when she opened the door, a pregnant young woman stood there trembling in the cold, clutching a worn suitcase with white knuckles. Mascara streaked down her face. "Is Travis Hunt your husband?" she whispered. Gertrude's stomach dropped. The girl swallowed hard before saying the words that shattered the last illusion of her marriage. "He told me he loved me. Then he disappeared when I told him about the baby. And somehow, the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how familiar the abandonment felt. If you've ever ignored your intuition because you love someone too much, this story will hurt in ways you won't expect. But stay until the end. Because sometimes the women men try hardest to destroy become the ones who finally save each other." Gertrude Hunt lived in the kind of house people slowed down to admire. The mansion sat behind black iron gates in one of Connecticut's wealthiest suburbs, surrounded by perfectly sculpted hedges and maple trees wrapped in golden string lights that stayed up long after Christmas because Travis said they made the property look expensive. Every room looked like a magazine spread. Cream-colored marble floors, cathedral ceilings, fresh white orchids replaced every Monday. The kind of life women on social media envied. The kind of marriage people toasted at charity galas. And yet standing in her kitchen at midnight with a pregnant stranger wrapped in one of her cashmere blankets, Gertrude suddenly realized something horrifying. Her home had never once felt safe. Savannah Reed sat quietly at the Marble Island Hands, trembling around a mug of tea she was too nervous to drink. Her suitcase rested near the doorway like she still wasn't sure she was allowed to stay. Gertrude watched her carefully. Young, beautiful, exhausted, not glamorous, beautiful, heartbroken beautiful, the kind of beauty that came from surviving something ugly. "What's your name again?" Gertrude asked softly. "Savannah." "How far along are you?" 23 weeks. Gertrude nodded slowly, though her chest tightened painfully. 23 weeks, almost 6 months. That meant while Travis had been kissing her forehead goodbye every morning, while he'd been complaining about investor meetings and business dinners, while he'd been rolling away from her in bed at night with a cold, distracted, "I'm tired," Gert, another woman had been carrying his child. The thought should have destroyed her immediately. Instead, it exhausted her, as if some part of her had already known. Savannah looked down at the mug. "I didn't come here to ruin your marriage." Gertrude almost laughed at the irony. Marriage? What marriage? A marriage was supposed to feel like partnership, like warmth, like loyalty, not like constantly apologizing for taking up emotional space. "You didn't ruin anything," Gertrude said quietly, and for the first time in years she meant something without softening it to protect someone else's feelings. Savannah's eyes filled with tears. "He told me you and him were basically over." "Of course he did." Gertrude leaned back against the counter and closed her eyes for a moment. Travis Hunt had always been talented at storytelling. That was how he became successful, how he climbed corporate America so quickly, how he convinced investors to trust him, how he convinced women to love him. He knew exactly what version of himself to perform. At charity events, he was charming and generous. At business conferences, he was confident and visionary. At home, he became something quieter, colder, more careful, a man who never screamed because bruises healed too visibly. Instead, Travis specialized in tiny cuts. "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. You always make things difficult. You used to be more fun." The words accumulated slowly over the years until Gertrude no longer recognized herself. She used to be ambitious once. Before Travis. Before she abandoned her architecture career to support his startup. Before she became the elegant wife smiling beside him in photographs while secretly feeling invisible. Savannah broke the silence carefully. "He talked about you a lot." That surprised her. Gertrude looked over. "What did he say?" Savannah hesitated. "That you didn't understand him anymore." A sharp ache spread through Gertrude's chest. Not because it hurt, because it sounded rehearsed, like he'd said it before, to other women, to himself, maybe even to justify what he was doing. "He said your marriage died years ago." Gertrude stared at the rain sliding down the windows. Funny, nobody had told her. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly through the silence. Savannah suddenly looked panicked. "I should go. You're not leaving at midnight in this weather. I can't stay here." "Yes," Gertrude said firmly. "You can." Savannah blinked at her. Gertrude realized she probably sounded different than expected. Maybe Savannah imagined a furious wife throwing wine glasses and screaming. Maybe she deserved that reaction. But Gertrude was too emotionally exhausted to perform rage on command. What she felt was stranger. A terrible kind of clarity. She walked toward the hallway. There's a guest suite upstairs. Savannah stood slowly. Why are you being kind to me? Gertrude stopped walking. For a second, emotion climbed into her throat so suddenly it almost choked her. Because nobody had been kind to her when she needed it. Because women were always expected to fight each other while men walked away untouched. Because Savannah looked terrified in exactly the same way Gertrude used to look every time Travis came home emotionally cold, and she blamed herself for it. You're pregnant and alone, Gertrude said softly. I know what loneliness looks like. Savannah's face crumpled. Gertrude quickly looked away before her own composure cracked too. Upstairs, the guest suite overlooked the back gardens. Gertrude handed Savannah towels and one of her old silk pajama sets. You can shower if you want. Thank you. Their fingers brushed briefly. Savannah's hands were freezing. Gertrude stepped out and quietly closed the door behind her. Then she stood alone in the hallway, staring into nothing. Her entire body felt numb. Not dramatic numbness. Not movie scene heartbreak. This felt quieter, more dangerous, like standing inside a collapsing building moments before the ceiling gave way. Downstairs, Travis's framed magazine cover sat above the fireplace. Fortune's fastest rising, CEO under 40. Gertrude walked toward it slowly. She remembered that photo shoot. The reporter barely acknowledged her except to ask if she could stand slightly behind Travis, as if even her position in the marriage had become decorative. Her eyes drifted across the room. Every piece of furniture, every polished surface, every expensive object, all of it existed because she helped build Travis's world. Her father introduced him to investors. Her family name opened doors. Her emotional labor held his life together while he chased power. And somehow Travis still made her feel like she contributed nothing. The sound of tires outside snapped her attention toward the window. Headlights cut through the rain. Her stomach dropped instantly. Travis. Gertrude's pulse began hammering. She checked the upstairs hallway instinctively. Savannah. Oh, God. The front door unlocked moments later. Travis entered, shaking rain from his coat, already loosening his tie. You're awake? He asked casually. Then he looked up and froze. Gertrude stood near the fireplace watching him with an expression he couldn't immediately read. That unsettled him. Usually she smiled automatically. Usually she rushed to smooth tension before it formed. Tonight she simply stared. Travis frowned slightly. What? For years Gertrude feared this man. Not physically, emotionally. She feared disappointing him, losing him, making him angry. But now with another woman carrying his child asleep upstairs beneath her roof, something inside her shifted quietly. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't afraid anymore. Then Travis's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out absent-mindedly. The screen lit up in the dim room, and Gertrude saw it. Savannah. Everything inside her went cold. Travis looked up too late and realized exactly what she had seen. For one long, suffocating second, nobody moved. Rain battered the windows behind Travis, as the glow from his phone screen illuminated the name Gertrude could no longer pretend meant nothing. Savannah Travis locked the phone instantly. Too late. The color drained from his face so fast it almost looked unreal. Gertrude, don't. Her voice came out quiet. That scared him more than screaming would have. Travis studied her carefully, searching for the version of his wife he understood best. The one who cried, questioned herself, softened too quickly. But Gertrude simply stood there in silence. And for the first time in years, Travis looked uncertain. She's here, isn't she? He asked slowly. The audacity of that question almost made Gertrude laugh. Not guilt, not shame, fear of inconvenience. That was what flashed across his face first. She came to my door in the rain. Carrying your child, Gertrude said. So yes, she's here. Travis closed his eyes briefly and muttered a curse under his breath, as if Savannah were a problem, as if she were a damaged business deal that refused to disappear quietly. Gertrude watched him carefully. Something strange was happening inside her. The pain was there, yes, sharp and humiliating and deep. But layered beneath it was something colder. Observation. For years she had spent so much energy trying to understand Travis emotionally that she never stopped to truly study him. Now she did. And suddenly he looked smaller. Not physically. Spiritually? You told her we were separated, Gertrude asked. It's complicated. No, she said calmly. It actually isn't. Travis ran a hand through his damp hair and lowered his voice instinctively. Can we not do this tonight? There it was again. That tone. The one that suggested her emotions were inconvenient scheduling conflicts. Gertrude remembered how effective it used to be, how quickly she'd silence herself to keep peace in the house. But tonight another woman was upstairs carrying proof of Travis's lies inside her body. Peace no longer existed here? She's 23 weeks pregnant? Travis looked away. That tiny movement told Gertrude everything. He knew exactly how far along Savannah was, meaning this wasn't some brief mistake. This was sustained deception. How long? Gertrude asked. Travis hesitated. That's not important. How long? A few months? Her stomach twisted. Liar. She could hear it immediately. You're lying again. Travis's jaw tightened. What do you want me to say? The truth. For once. But Gertrude already sensed something devastating. Men like Travis rarely lied once. They built entire lives out of layered performances. Before she could answer, soft footsteps echoed from upstairs. Savannah appeared at the top of the staircase wearing Gertrude's silk pajamas, frozen in horror the second she saw Travis below. The air shifted instantly. Travis stared at her. Savannah stared back with visible hurt and panic, and Gertrude stood between them, feeling like she was watching two people emerge from a fire carrying different versions of the same burn. Savannah's eyes filled first. You told me you loved me? Travis exhaled heavily, like an exhausted parent dealing with unreasonable children. Savannah? Not now. Not now. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I hurt you. Not, you're carrying my baby. Just irritation. Savannah descended the stairs slowly, one trembling hand protecting her stomach instinctively. You vanished, she whispered. I called you for 3 weeks. I sent money. Gertrude physically flinched. Savannah looked humiliated. I didn't want your money. Travis rubbed his forehead. Jesus Christ. And suddenly Gertrude saw it. The entire structure of him. Every relationship reduced to usefulness. Every woman reduced to emotional labor. Savannah was exciting until responsibility appeared. Gertrude was valuable until she became emotionally inconvenient. Love to Travis was transactional. Did you ask her to get rid of the baby? Gertrude asked quietly. Travis looked at her sharply. That's between me and Savannah. Which meant yes. Savannah began crying silently. Not dramatic crying. The exhausted kind. The kind that happened when hope finally died. He said having the baby would ruin his life. She whispered. Gertrude closed her eyes briefly. Memory struck her suddenly. 7 years earlier, a doctor's office, white walls, the smell of antiseptic. Gertrude sitting silently after learning she miscarried at 10 weeks. Travis checking work emails beside her. It's probably for the best, he'd said afterward while driving home. The timing wasn't ideal. At the time, she told herself he just processed grief differently. Now she wondered if he'd ever grieved at all. Savannah looked at Gertrude miserably. I swear I didn't know. I know. You probably hate me. Gertrude opened her eyes. No, she said honestly. I think he counted on that. Travis scoffed. Can we stop acting like I'm some villain? The room went silent. Gertrude stared at him in disbelief. A pregnant woman had arrived abandoned at their doorstep in the middle of the night, and somehow he still saw himself as misunderstood. You cheated on your wife, Savannah said shakily. You lied to both of us. Travis's expression hardened immediately. I never promised either of you perfection. The cruelty of that sentence settled heavily in the room. Gertrude realized something terrifying then. This was who he really was beneath the polished charm. Not emotional, not conflicted, entitled. Savannah suddenly looked nauseous. She pressed a hand to her mouth and rushed toward the downstairs bathroom. The door slammed moments later. Silence followed. Travis sighed heavily. She's unstable. Gertrude turned toward him slowly. You got a pregnant woman abandoned and terrified, and your first instinct is to call her unstable. She's emotional. She's pregnant. She knew what this was. Gertrude's voice sharpened for the first time. No, she knew the fantasy you sold her. That landed. Travis's eyes darkened slightly. For years, he'd conditioned Gertrude to doubt her own instincts, but tonight she was seeing too clearly, and he hated it. She manipulated you fast, he muttered. Gertrude almost smiled at the predictability. Of course. Divide the women, make them distrust each other. Classic. She didn't manipulate me, Gertrude replied quietly. She told me the truth. Travis stepped closer, and instinctively Gertrude's body tensed, not because he might hit her, because she knew this version of him, the controlled one, the dangerous calm. Gertrude, he said softly, you are blowing this completely out of proportion. There it was, the gaslighting, familiar, polished, almost comforting in its normalcy, except this time it sounded pathetic, out of proportion. Another woman carrying his child upstairs while his wife stood downstairs defending her sanity. Gertrude suddenly felt unbelievably tired. Not just tonight. Years tired. Marriage tired. Emotionally starved tired. How long were you planning to hide her? She asked. Travis said nothing. That silence answered enough. Savannah slowly emerged from the bathroom, wiping tears from her face. Travis barely looked at her, and Savannah noticed. Gertrude saw the exact moment something broke inside the younger woman. Not heartbreak, illusion. You really don't love me, Savannah whispered. Travis immediately became irritated. I never said that. You literally said you wanted a future with me. I said a lot of things. Savannah stared at him like she'd no longer recognized the man she'd fallen for. Gertrude understood that feeling intimately, because the worst betrayals weren't discovering someone lied. It was realizing the person you loved might never have existed at all. Savannah slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled violently. I should show her, she whispered. Travis's expression changed instantly. Savannah? Fear. Real fear this time. She opened the messages, then handed the phone to Gertrude. And there it was. A text from Travis sent 2 weeks earlier. She can never know about you. Gertrude stared at the screen while something cold and irreversible settled inside her chest. Up outside, lightning split across the dark Connecticut sky, and somewhere deep down, the woman Travis spent years controlling quietly disappeared. The next evening, Gertrude sat at the head of a 12-seat dining table, wearing diamond earrings Travis bought her after forgetting their anniversary 3 years earlier. The irony almost made her sick. Candles flickered against crystal glassware, while soft jazz played through hidden speakers in the mansion. The dining room looked immaculate, elegant, expensive, like every lie Travis ever told. Outside, snow drifted quietly across the back gardens, covering the world in deceptive beauty. Inside, Savannah sat hidden in the detached guest house beyond the pool, invisible from the main house, unless someone deliberately looked for her. Travis made sure nobody did. You look tired, Margaret Hunt observed coldly from across the table. Gertrude lifted her wineglass slowly. I didn't sleep well. Margaret gave a humorless smile. A woman should never let herself look exhausted. Men notice these things. Of course she'd say that. Margaret Hunt belonged to a generation of women who survived misogyny by becoming loyal to it. She spent decades protecting powerful men while criticizing women for failing to endure them gracefully. Gertrude used to crave her approval. Now she simply pitied her. To Margaret's right sat Ethan Cole Travis's longtime business partner, along with 2 major investors from Manhattan and James Holloway, a silver-haired venture capitalist whose approval Travis practically worshipped. This dinner mattered. Travis's new merger depended on it. And somehow, despite discovering his affair less than 24 hours earlier, Gertrude still found herself helping serve wine like the polished corporate wife she'd been trained to become. The performance exhausted her. Travis sat beside her calm and perfectly composed. Nobody at the table would have guessed he spent half the morning begging her not to embarrass him publicly. People are depending on this merger, he warned earlier in their bedroom while knotting his tie. Not I hurt you. Not, I'm sorry. Business first. Always. Now he smiled easily at the investors while discussing expansion plans. The Chicago acquisition gives us leverage across the East Coast market. James Holloway nodded approvingly. Aggressive. I like aggressive. Of course you do, Gertrude thought. Men like James always admired ambition most when somebody else paid the emotional cost for it. Travis reached for Gertrude's hand beneath the table suddenly. The gesture looked affectionate to outsiders, possessive to her. His fingers tightened once in warning. Behave. Gertrude slowly removed her hand from his. A flicker of irritation crossed his face before disappearing behind another polished smile. Interesting. Tiny acts of resistance affected him more than tears ever had. Margaret noticed immediately. You two seem tense. Travis laughed lightly. Gertrude's been emotional lately. There it was again. Emotional. The word he used whenever he wanted to discredit her feelings without sounding cruel. One of the investors chuckled sympathetically. My wife gets like that whenever I travel too much. The men laughed softly. Gertrude stared at her plate. Years ago, moments like this made her feel ashamed for being hurt. Now she felt something else. Disgust. Not just at Travis. At how normalized this behavior was. Women carried marriages emotionally while men mocked them for needing affection in return. Margaret sipped wine elegantly. A smart wife learns that successful men require freedom. Gertrude looked at her slowly. Freedom. Interesting word for betrayal. What exactly does freedom mean? Gertrude asked quietly. Margaret blinked. The question clearly surprised her. It means understanding sacrifice. No, Gertrude replied calmly. I think sacrifice and humiliation are different things. The table fell subtly quieter. Travis shot her a warning glance. Gertrude ignored it. For years she swallowed every uncomfortable truth to preserve appearances. Tonight she suddenly wondered why. Why women were expected to protect men from consequences. Why silence was considered dignity. Why endurance was romanticized. Ethan cleared his throat awkwardly. So, Travis? Tell us more about the Manhattan investors, coward Gertrude thought. Not because Ethan knew about the affair, because men always sensed dysfunction and immediately protected each other from discomfort. Travis smoothly returned to business conversation. Confident, controlled, charismatic. Watching him now almost felt surreal. How many versions of himself existed the devoted husband, the visionary CEO, the secret lover, the manipulator? Gertrude suddenly realized something chilling. Travis adapted personalities depending on what benefited him most. Even his warmth was strategic. A maid quietly refilled glasses before disappearing again. Gertrude noticed her hands shaking slightly. Everyone in this house walked carefully around Travis. Even the staff, especially the women. James Holloway leaned back in his chair. You're lucky, Travis? A stable marriage reassures investors. Gertrude nearly laughed out loud. Travis smiled modestly. Gertrude's always been my foundation. The audacity of it burned. Foundation. Yes, she had been. She sacrificed her career, her time, her youth, her emotional stability, and Travis stood on top of everything she built while making her feel small inside it. The rage inside her remained strangely calm. Cold rage, the dangerous kind. Margaret turned toward Gertrude again. Have you two reconsidered children? The question hit like broken glass. Travis stiffened slightly beside her. Gertrude looked down at her wine. Years ago, she wanted children desperately, but after the miscarriage, Travis slowly turned every conversation about parenthood into a burden. The timing isn't right. We're too busy. Maybe later. Eventually, she stopped asking. Now another woman carried the child he never wanted with her. I think Travis prefers uncomplicated women, Gertrude said softly. The silence afterward was immediate. Travis's eyes snapped toward her. Margaret frowned sharply. What is that supposed to mean? Gertrude finally looked up. It means some men only enjoy women when they're convenient. Travis smiled tightly. Gertrude's joking. No, she said. I'm really not. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. James Holloway suddenly seemed fascinated by his stake. Nobody wanted direct conflict, especially wealthy people. They preferred beautiful dysfunction hidden beneath expensive lighting. Travis leaned closer toward Gertrude, voice dangerously low. What exactly are you doing? Something inside her almost trembled, not from fear, from the realization that she no longer cared about pleasing him. That depends, she answered quietly. How honest would you like this evening to become? For one brief second, genuine panic flashed across Travis's face. Good. Let him feel unstable for once. Margaret set her fork down sharply. This is inappropriate. Gertrude turned toward her slowly. With respect, Margaret, I think what's inappropriate is pretending men deserve loyalty they never offer in return. Margaret looked horrified. Not at Travis. At Gertrude for saying it aloud. That told Gertrude everything about the family she married into. Women were expected to absorb pain silently, so powerful men could remain comfortable. Travis forced a laugh. I apologize, everyone. My wife's under a lot of stress. Again. My wife is irrational. My wife is unstable. My wife cannot be trusted emotionally. Gertrude suddenly saw the pattern so clearly, she almost felt embarrassed she missed it before. He didn't need to scream to control her. He simply rewrote reality until she questioned herself first. James Holloway finally spoke carefully. Maybe we should continue this another evening. Fear flickered behind Travis's eyes instantly. No. He needed tonight. Needed this deal. Needed these men impressed. And suddenly Gertrude understood where his real vulnerability lived. Not in love, not in family. Image. That was the thing he protected most violently. His reputation, his success, his illusion. The realization sent a dangerous calm through her body. Travis squeezed her knee hard beneath the table. A warning. Gertrude looked down at his hand slowly, then back up at him, and smiled. Not warmly, just knowingly. For the first time in their marriage, Travis looked uncertain of her. That uncertainty unsettled him deeply. Gertrude lifted her wine glass gracefully. To honesty, she said softly. The room stilled. Even buried things eventually rot to the surface. Nobody spoke, not even Travis. And somewhere beyond the mansion walls, hidden in the guest house carrying his child, Savannah sat alone in the dark while the empire Travis built began cracking from the inside. Gertrude waited until 2:13 in the morning before opening Travis's office. The mansion was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant winter wind brushing against the windows. Travis had fallen asleep an hour earlier after pretending nothing unusual happened at dinner. That part almost fascinated her. How easily he compartmentalized destruction. He slept peacefully while two women cried because of him under the same roof. Gertrude stepped inside the office carefully and shut the door behind her. The room smelled like leather whiskey and expensive cologne. Travis loved this room. Dark oak shelves, floor-to-ceiling windows, awards displayed like holy artifacts, everything designed to communicate power. Gertrude used to admire it. Now it looked like a museum dedicated to narcissism. She sat at his desk slowly. For a moment, guilt flickered through her. She had never invaded his privacy before. Even when her instincts screamed something was wrong, she respected boundaries. Travis never respected himself. But boundaries without reciprocity were just obedience disguised as virtue. Gertrude turned on his computer, password protected. Of course. She stared at the screen for several seconds before typing one word. Harvard, 2012. Access granted immediately. A sad laugh escaped her throat. Men like Travis always believed they were more complicated than they actually were. Folders filled the desktop. Investor reports, acquisition plans, financial projections, and one hidden folder tucked near the bottom labeled tax documents. Too obvious. Gertrude opened it. Nothing. Empty. Her pulse quickened. No, not empty. The folder contained another hidden encrypted drive. She stared at it silently. Years ago, this would have intimidated her. Now it angered her. Because innocent people rarely lived like fugitives inside their own marriages. Gertrude grabbed her phone and texted Rachel Whitmore. You were right. There's something hidden. The response came almost immediately despite the late hour. Then stop looking at him like your husband and start looking at him like a liability. Gertrude leaned back slowly. Rachel always spoke with terrifying precision. They hadn't been close in years. Not because of distance, because Travis hated Rachel. At the time, Gertrude thought it was personality conflict. Now she understood. Rachel noticed things. That made her dangerous. Another message appeared. Can you access financial records? Gertrude typed back. Some. Not all. Rachel responded, Good. Tomorrow I'll connect you with a forensic accountant. Do not tell Travis anything yet. Gertrude stared at the words. Forensic accountant. Divorce suddenly felt less like heartbreak and more like war preparation. The realization made her chest ache. Not because she wanted to save the marriage anymore, because she finally accepted it might never have been real. A soft knock startled her. Gertrude quickly locked the screen. Savannah stood hesitantly in the doorway, wrapped in one of Gertrude's sweaters. I'm sorry, Savannah whispered. I saw the light. Gertrude softened slightly. You should be sleeping. I had another nightmare. Of course she did. Stress radiated from Savannah constantly now. Even her hands looked exhausted. Gertrude motioned toward the sofa near the fireplace. Savannah sat carefully, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. For a few moments, neither woman spoke. Then Savannah's voice cracked quietly. "He looked at me tonight like I was disposable." Gertrude swallowed hard, because she knew that look. Every woman who loved Travis eventually received it, the moment he no longer needed them emotionally. "He's been doing that to me for years," Gertrude admitted softly. Savannah looked up slowly. "Why did you stay?" The question pierced deeper than expected. Why had she stayed? Because she loved him? Because she believed marriage required endurance? Because leaving felt like failure? Or because Travis slowly convinced her she'd become impossible to love? "I kept thinking if I became easier," Gertrude whispered. "More patient, less emotional, less demanding." Her voice faded. Savannah looked heartbroken for her. "You changed yourself for him." Gertrude laughed softly without humor. "That's the tragic thing about women like us. What we don't realize we're disappearing until there's almost nothing left." Silence settled heavily between them. Savannah suddenly looked ashamed. "I feel guilty being here. You shouldn't." "But I slept with your husband." Gertrude met her eyes calmly. "No," she said quietly. "You trusted a liar." Savannah burst into tears instantly. Gertrude moved beside her automatically, and for a strange emotional moment the mansion no longer felt like Travis's kingdom. It felt like a shelter filled with women surviving him. Savannah cried into her hands. "He promised he'd take care of us. Us, not me." The baby mattered to her already. Gertrude felt an ache spread through her chest unexpectedly. Years ago, she imagined herself pregnant in this house. She imagined tiny footsteps on marble floors, Christmas mornings, nursery walls, family. Instead, she got emotional isolation wrapped in luxury packaging. Savannah wiped her eyes shakily. "He said you didn't understand his pressure." Gertrude almost smiled. That man could cheat during a hurricane and still blame atmospheric conditions. Savannah let out a startled laugh through tears. The sound felt strangely healing. Then Gertrude's phone buzzed again. "Rachel?" "I ran a preliminary search on Travis's companies." Gertrude opened the message immediately. Several shell corporations appeared attached beneath Travis's primary business group. Her stomach tightened. One company name repeated multiple times beside overseas transfers. Hunt Strategic Holdings. She had never heard of it. Rachel sent another message. These accounts were likely created to move marital assets. He may have planned for exposure long before Savannah. Gertrude went cold. Long before Savannah. Meaning Travis didn't just betray impulsively. He prepared strategically, like a man expecting eventual consequences. Savannah watched her face carefully. "What happened?" Gertrude slowly lowered the phone. "He's hiding money." Savannah looked confused. "Why?" "Because men like Travis always assume they'll eventually need an escape route." The realization settled heavily over both women. This wasn't just infidelity, it was architecture. Manipulation designed carefully over years. Gertrude suddenly remembered every time Travis insisted certain assets stay under business management. Every document he rushed her through signing, every conversation where he dismissed her questions as unnecessary stress. A wave of nausea hit her. He planned this. Maybe not specifically Savannah, but betrayal in general, because loyalty was never part of his long-term strategy. Savannah's voice trembled. "What are you going to do?" Gertrude stared toward the dark windows. Snow covered the backyard like a blank page, waiting for something irreversible to be written across it. For years she survived by minimizing herself, making excuses, absorbing emotional damage quietly. But tonight something dangerous was growing beneath her grief. Awareness. "I'm going to stop protecting him," she said softly. Upstairs footsteps suddenly echoed. Heavy footsteps. Travis. Both women froze instantly. Savannah's face drained of color. Gertrude stood quickly just as Travis appeared in the doorway, wearing gray sweatpants and irritation. His eyes immediately landed on Savannah, then on Gertrude's phone. "What's going on?" Nobody answered. Travis's expression sharpened. "Why are you both awake?" Still acting like authority belonged to him automatically. Gertrude noticed it now in every sentence, every tone, every assumption. "I asked you a question." Savannah visibly shrank under his voice. That infuriated Gertrude immediately. "She had a nightmare," Gertrude answered coldly. Travis exhaled heavily. "This arrangement isn't sustainable." arrangement. As if Savannah and the baby were scheduling inconveniences. Savannah looked down instantly, and suddenly Gertrude saw something else clearly. Fear. Savannah was afraid of him, not because he was violent physically, because emotional manipulators train people to fear disapproval itself. Travis stepped closer toward Gertrude. You're making this mess bigger than it needs to be. Gertrude stared at him. Then something caught her eye, a small black icon blinking briefly near the top corner of her phone screen. Her blood ran cold instantly. Tracking software. She looked back at Travis slowly, too calm, too observant, too aware. You tracked my phone, she whispered. For the first time all night. Travis looked caught. Travis recovered too quickly. That was the terrifying thing about men like him. Even when caught, they adapted fast enough to make you question whether the violation happened at all. You're being dramatic, he said calmly. Gertrude stared at him in disbelief. The tracking icon still blinked faintly in the corner of her phone screen, like proof of something rotten hiding beneath the surface of her marriage. You put spyware on my phone. It's not spyware. Savannah looked horrified. Travis rubbed his forehead like they were exhausting him. We share locations. Couples do that. No, Gertrude said quietly. Couples consent to that. Something flickered across Travis's face then. Not guilt. Annoyance that she was becoming harder to manipulate. He stepped closer, lowering his voice into that controlled tone Gertrude used to mistake for maturity. I installed security software after those break-ins last year. Gertrude almost laughed. There had been one attempted break-in nearly 11 months ago. One, and suddenly that justified monitoring her private conversations. You tracked me, she repeated. Travis's jaw tightened slightly. I was protecting my wife. Protecting. Another word abusive men love to weaponize. Protecting, providing, leading. Words that sounded loving until you realized they translated into control. Savannah stood quietly near the fireplace, visibly shrinking with every passing second. Gertrude noticed immediately. Travis consumed emotional oxygen from rooms without even raising his voice. You should go back upstairs, Travis told Savannah without looking at her. Not concern. Dismissal. Savannah looked embarrassed instantly, like she'd been reduced from person to inconvenience again. Gertrude stepped between them before she could obey automatically. She stays. Travis's eyes snapped toward his wife. The direct defiance stunned him. For years, Gertrude negotiated every disagreement carefully to avoid conflict. Now she interrupted him without hesitation. You're making this worse, he warned quietly. No, Gertrude replied. You did that when you lied to two women simultaneously. The room fell silent. Snow drifted softly outside while tension thickened inside the mansion, like invisible smoke. Travis looked at Savannah finally. Did you tell her everything? Savannah swallowed hard. I told her the truth. That's not what I asked. Gertrude immediately recognized the tactic. Intimidation through precision. Make the other person uncertain. Make them feel accused without technically accusing them. Savannah's fingers trembled against her sweater. Gertrude moved beside her instinctively. That small movement visibly irritated Travis. Interesting. He hated losing emotional control over women more than losing affection itself. I'm taking Savannah to a doctor tomorrow, Gertrude announced. Travis blinked once. What, she needs prenatal care? I already handled that. No, Savannah whispered shakily. You canceled my insurance. Silence. Absolute silence. Travis looked furious now, not because she exposed him, but because she did it in front of Gertrude. That's not what happened. Savannah's eyes filled with tears instantly. You said you couldn't keep paying for something that should have been solved already. The words landed like a physical blow. Gertrude slowly turned toward her husband. You tried to pressure her into terminating the pregnancy. Travis exploded suddenly. Oh my God, enough. The sharpness of his voice echoed violently through the room. Savannah physically flinched, and Gertrude saw it. Not just fear. Conditioning. The kind women develop when they spend too long around emotionally volatile men. Travis realized he lost control for a moment and immediately softened his expression. Classic. Create fear, then perform calmness. I'm under pressure, he said, voice lower now. You both have no idea what's at stake right now. Gertrude almost admired the narcissism. Somehow his affair manipulation, financial deception, and emotional abuse still centered around his stress. What's at stake? Gertrude asked coldly. Your image? Travis stared at her. For years she avoided saying the thing underneath the thing. Now she was speaking too clearly. That merger matters, he snapped. Hundreds of employees depend on it. There it is, Gertrude whispered. What you only understand of morality when money enters the conversation. His face hardened instantly. Savannah suddenly grabbed her stomach sharply. Gertrude turned immediately. What's wrong? I'm okay, Savannah whispered breathlessly, but she clearly wasn't. Her breathing became shallow, panic. Gertrude recognized it instantly because she used to have panic attacks too, back when Travis convinced her she was emotionally unstable for reacting to his cruelty. Sit down, Gertrude said gently. Savannah obeyed quickly, tears sliding down her face. I can't breathe right. Travis looked irritated again. Not concerned, irritated. That realization finally destroyed something inside Gertrude permanently. How many times had she mistaken emotional absence for masculinity? How many years did she spend romanticizing a man fundamentally incapable of empathy? Gertrude knelt beside Savannah carefully. Look at me, she said softly. Slow breaths. Savannah nodded shakily. It hurts. Fear surged through Gertrude instantly, not because she understood pregnancy medically, because she understood stress physically. Women's bodies carried emotional violence long after conversations ended. We're going to the hospital, Gertrude said firmly. Savannah immediately panicked harder. No, I can't afford, I'll handle it. Travis scoffed softly. This is unnecessary. Gertrude looked up at him slowly, and suddenly something terrifying happened. She saw him completely clearly, not as her husband, not as the man she loved, just a selfish person watching a pregnant woman struggle to breathe while worrying primarily about inconvenience. You don't get a vote anymore, she said quietly. That hit him hard. Travis's expression darkened instantly. You're still my wife. The sentence slithered through the room like poison. Not loving, possessive. Gertrude stood slowly. And you stopped acting like my husband a long time ago. For a second, real hatred flashed across Travis's face. Not annoyance, hatred. Because control was slipping. Because the woman he trained to self-doubt was finally seeing him without distortion. Savannah suddenly whispered something small and broken. I really thought he loved me. Gertrude turned toward her. The grief in Savannah's eyes looked painfully young. God. She remembered being that woman. The woman who confused attention for love because she desperately wanted tenderness to be real. Gertrude crouched beside her again. Men like Travis don't love people, she said softly. They love reflections of themselves. Travis laughed bitterly. You're unbelievable. No, Gertrude answered calmly. I was just loyal longer than I should have been. The silence afterward felt enormous. Outside, snow continued falling across the perfectly manicured estate, while inside the illusion of the Hunt marriage finally collapsed completely. Gertrude helped Savannah grab her coat. Travis stepped forward sharply. You are not dragging our private life through hospitals and doctors. Our private life. Another manipulative phrase. As if secrecy deserved protection more than human well-being. Gertrude walked toward the foyer without answering him. Travis followed. Gertrude. She ignored him. Gertrude. Still nothing. Then his voice changed. Colder. Dangerously controlled. If you walk out that door against me, don't expect things to stay civil. That stopped her. Not because she feared him, because suddenly she understood something crucial. Travis already saw her as an opponent, not a wife, not a grieving partner, an obstacle, and men like Travis destroyed obstacles. Slowly, Gertrude turned around. For years, this man dictated the emotional climate of her life. One mood from him could ruin entire weeks. One cold glance could make her question her worth, but tonight she saw something he never intended her to notice. He was afraid too. Afraid of exposure, afraid of losing status, afraid of losing control over the narrative, and fear made narcissistic men dangerous. I'm done protecting your secrets, Gertrude said quietly. Something shifted in Travis's expression then. A crack, tiny, but visible. Because for the first time since he met her, Gertrude Hunt sounded like a woman preparing to leave. Savannah leaned weakly against the wall beside her. Gertrude wrapped an arm around the younger woman protectively. Then together, without another word, they walked toward the front door. Behind them, Travis stood in the middle of his perfect mansion, realizing the women he thought he controlled were beginning to choose each other over him. And that terrified him more than scandal ever could. The private women's clinic smelled like lavender and antiseptic. Gertrude sat beside Savannah in the waiting room at 7:30 the next morning, while pale winter sunlight spilled through enormous glass windows overlooking downtown Stamford. Neither woman had slept much. Savannah looked emotionally hollowed out, her face bare, without makeup hands, wrapped protectively around the curve of her stomach, as if she feared someone might still try to take the baby away. Gertrude understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. Not fear for a child, fear of losing yourself completely. A nurse finally approached them gently. Savannah Reed Savannah stood too quickly and winced. Gertrude instinctively steadied her elbow. That small gesture almost made Savannah cry again. Nobody had been gentle with her in weeks. Inside the examination room, Dr. Naomi Bennett reviewed Savannah's chart with a growing crease between her brows. "You've been under severe stress," she said carefully. Savannah looked embarrassed immediately, like emotional suffering was something shameful. "I'm trying not to be." Dr. Bennett gave her a sympathetic look. Stress during pregnancy isn't a moral failure, sweetheart." Gertrude felt something tighten painfully in her chest. How different women sounded when they weren't trying to dominate each other. The doctor continued scanning records. Then her expression changed subtly. "Your insurance was terminated 2 weeks ago." Savannah stared at her, what Gertrude already knew, but hearing it aloud made the cruelty feel more real somehow. Dr. Bennett looked confused. "You weren't informed." Savannah's lips parted slowly. "No." Travis said there were billing complications. The doctor glanced between both women, carefully, clearly sensing the emotional tension in the room. "Well," she said gently, "whatever happened, we'll make sure you and the baby are monitored properly moving forward." Savannah nodded weakly before looking down. Gertrude recognized the expression instantly. Humiliation? Not because she needed help, because she trusted the wrong person. After the ultrasound, Savannah cried quietly while listening to the baby's heartbeat. A fast, steady rhythm filled the room, alive, innocent. Completely unaware of the emotional wreckage surrounding its existence, Gertrude suddenly had to look away. Years ago, she and Travis sat in another examination room, listening to silence where a heartbeat should have been. She remembered gripping the paper edge of the hospital bed while the technician avoided eye contact. She remembered the emptiness afterward. And most vividly, she remembered Travis checking emails before they even left the parking lot. At the time, she convinced herself grief affected people differently. Now she wondered if he simply lacked the emotional depth for grief at all. Savannah wiped tears from her cheeks. "I didn't think I'd get attached this fast." Dr. Bennett smiled softly. "That's usually how motherhood begins." Gertrude watched Savannah place both hands over her stomach protectively. A strange warmth spread through her chest unexpectedly. Not jealousy, something sadder and softer. The realization that Travis had treated even this new life vulnerability, fear, as disposable. Back in the parking garage afterward, Savannah leaned against Gertrude's black Range Rover, looking exhausted. Snow flurries drifted lazily through the gray morning air. "You don't have to keep helping me," Savannah whispered. Gertrude unlocked the passenger door slowly. "Yes, I do." "Why? Because nobody helped me when I was drowning emotionally. Because women are taught to compete for scraps of male affection instead of protecting each other. Because if I abandon you too, then Travis wins twice. But Gertrude only said because you deserve support." Savannah's eyes filled instantly again. God. Traumatized women apologized for existing constantly. The drive into Manhattan remained quiet until Savannah finally asked, "What happens now?" Gertrude stared ahead at the highway. For years, she avoided asking herself difficult questions because the answers threatened her entire identity. Now she couldn't avoid them anymore. "Now," she said slowly, "I stopped pretending my marriage is salvageable." The words tasted terrifying. And freeing. Savannah looked nervous. "Are you divorcing him?" Gertrude didn't answer immediately. Instead, memories flooded her mind in painful fragments. Travis mocking her architecture sketches years earlier. "You're talented, but my career needs priority right now." Travis discouraging girls' trips. "Your friends fill your head with nonsense." Travis criticizing her reactions until she apologized for emotions he caused. Tiny erosions. So subtle individually. Devastating collectively. "Yes," Gertrude whispered finally. "I think I am." Saying it aloud made her hands tremble against the steering wheel. Not because she doubted herself. Because women like Gertrude were raised to believe enduring unhappiness was maturity. Leaving felt almost revolutionary. By noon, Gertrude sat inside a sleek midtown law office overlooking Park Avenue. Rachel Whitmore entered carrying 2 coffees and the terrifying energy of a woman who'd never once apologized for taking up space. Sharp navy suit, dark curls, eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Rachel studied Gertrude for 3 seconds before setting coffee down. "You look emotionally concussed." Despite everything, Gertrude laughed softly. "I missed you too." Rachel sat across from her, then her expression shifted into something gentler. "He really did a number on you, didn't he?" The compassion nearly broke Gertrude instantly. Not because Rachel pitied her, because she believed her. That mattered more than Gertrude realized. For years, Travis convinced her she exaggerated everything. Now, another woman looked at her pain and called it real immediately. Gertrude swallowed hard. "I feel stupid." Rachel leaned back sharply. "Absolutely not. You warned me about him. I warned you he liked control. I didn't know he was financially predatory, too." Gertrude blinked. Financially predatory, Rachel opened a folder thick with printed documents. "Gertrude, your husband has been quietly restructuring assets for at least 18 months. Cold spread through her body. What does that mean?" "It means he anticipated needing protection." Protection. Again that word. Men like Travis always framed selfishness as survival. Rachel slid several papers across the desk. Shell corporations, offshore holdings, transfers, numbers large enough to make Gertrude nauseous. "He's hiding money," Rachel said flatly. "And based on timing, I'd guess he started before Savannah." Meaning betrayal wasn't impulsive. It was planned behavior, a lifestyle. Gertrude suddenly felt foolish for every moment she defended him publicly. Rachel watched her carefully. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "This next part matters." Gertrude nodded slowly. "You are not dealing with an emotionally conflicted man. You are dealing with a narcissist losing control of his narrative." The sentence hit hard. Because deep down, Gertrude knew it was true. Rachel continued, "Men like Travis don't fear hurting women. They fear consequences." Silence settled heavily inside the office. Outside the windows, Manhattan moved coldly beneath the winter sky while Gertrude's entire understanding of her marriage rearranged itself into something uglier and clearer. Rachel opened another folder. "This is where we start fighting back." Gertrude stared at the paperwork. Legal strategy, financial freezes, asset tracing. For the first time, divorce stopped feeling like emotional failure and started feeling like survival. Then Rachel looked up calmly and said one more thing. Gertrude frowned slightly. Rachel's eyes hardened. "Do not underestimate him once he realizes you're serious." A chill ran through Gertrude instantly, because somewhere deep down, she already knew Travis Hunt was most dangerous when he was losing. The ballroom glittered like money pretending to be elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung above hundreds of wealthy guests inside the St. Regis Manhattan, while waiters in white gloves carried champagne across polished marble floors. A live string quartet played near the stage beneath towering arrangements of white roses and gold orchids, chosen personally by Gertrude 3 weeks earlier. Back when she still believed appearances mattered. Tonight was supposed to celebrate 2 things: the 10th anniversary of Travis Hunt's company and the public announcement of his newest merger deal. Instead, Gertrude suspected it might become the beginning of his collapse. She stood in front of a mirror inside the hotel's private suite, adjusting diamond earrings with slow, steady hands. She wore black tonight. Not mourning black. Power black. A silk gown that hugged her figure with quiet confidence. Minimal jewelry. Hair swept elegantly away from her face. For years, Travis preferred softer looks on her. Delicate, approachable. Tonight she looked untouchable. A knock sounded behind her. Savannah stepped into the suite, carefully wearing a loose, cream-colored dress beneath a long wool coat. She still looked nervous being here. Gertrude understood why. This room was filled with people who worshipped wealth more than morality. Women like Savannah got destroyed in places like this. "You don't have to do this," Savannah whispered. Gertrude turned from the mirror. "Yes," she said calmly. "I do." Savannah looked down at her hands. "What if everyone hates me?" Gertrude walked toward her slowly. Then she gently lifted Savannah's chin. "Men like Travis survive because women are taught to feel ashamed for the damage men cause." Savannah's eyes filled immediately. "You did nothing wrong by believing someone who lied professionally?" The younger woman let out a shaky breath. Gertrude smiled faintly. "And for the record, Half the women in that ballroom have probably been cheated on by men standing beside them. Savannah actually laughed quietly. Good. Fear loosened slightly from her shoulders. A text buzzed on Gertrude's phone. "Travis, where are you?" Another followed instantly. "Don't embarrass me tonight." Gertrude stared at the message. Fascinating. Even now, after everything, his greatest fear remained humiliation. Not losing her, not losing integrity, image. She locked the phone without responding. Downstairs, applause erupted as another executive finished speaking near the stage. Savannah glanced toward the ballroom nervously. "I can wait upstairs." "No," Gertrude said softly. Then her expression hardened slightly. "You spent months hiding for his comfort. Tonight he gets uncomfortable instead." The ballroom doors opened moments later. Conversations softened instantly. Heads turned. Gertrude Hunt had always been beautiful, but tonight there was something else around her. Stillness. The kind powerful women carried after surviving something painful. Travis stood near the investors in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, laughing beside Ethan Cole and James Holloway. Then he saw her, and visibly froze. For a moment, genuine confusion crossed his face, because Gertrude wasn't supposed to look like this. Not composed, not elegant, not emotionally unreachable. She was supposed to look wounded, controllable. Instead, she looked like a woman keeping dangerous secrets. Travis recovered quickly and approached with a polished smile. "There you are." His eyes flicked toward Savannah behind her instantly. The smile tightened. "What is she doing here?" Gertrude accepted a champagne glass from a passing waiter before answering. Existing publicly, Gertrude. That tone again. Warning disguised as intimacy, she ignored it. Around them, wealthy guests mingled beneath golden lighting, completely unaware the marriage they admired was rotting internally. "How are the investors?" Gertrude asked pleasantly. Travis lowered his voice immediately. "Do not do this here." "Interesting. Fear again." "You seem nervous. I'm serious." "So am I." For a second, neither moved. Then James Holloway approached, smiling broadly. "Gertrude," he said warmly. "You look stunning tonight." She smiled politely. "Thank you, James." His eyes shifted briefly toward Savannah with subtle curiosity. People noticed more than Travis realized. Especially rich people. They survived socially by detecting weakness early. James lowered his voice slightly. "We're excited about tonight's announcement." "Of course you are," Gertrude thought. Men like James admired Travis because they saw ambition. They never saw the women emotionally buried beneath it. Travis placed a possessive hand against Gertrude's lower back. The gesture looked affectionate. Her skin crawled instantly. "We're all excited," Travis said smoothly. "Liar." The orchestra shifted into softer music while giant projection screens displayed Travis's company logo across the ballroom. Hunt Strategic Group. Gertrude stared at the name. Not ours. His. Everything always became his eventually. Her sacrifices, her emotional labor, her family connections, even the version of herself she lost trying to support him. Ethan Cole approached carefully with visible tension. He looked exhausted tonight, sweaty, uneasy. Good. Maybe conscience was finally finding him too. "You okay?" Ethan asked Gertrude quietly. What a ridiculous question. "No, Ethan. I discovered my husband impregnated another woman while secretly restructuring assets and emotionally manipulating me for years. But thanks for asking at the corporate gala. I'm wonderful," she answered pleasantly. Ethan looked unconvinced. Travis immediately interrupted. "We should prepare for the announcement. Control the narrative, always." Gertrude watched him greet investors effortlessly as they moved toward the stage area, and suddenly an old memory surfaced. 5 years ago. Gertrude sitting alone at their kitchen island at midnight waiting for Travis to come home. She had just won a regional architecture award for a design she secretly submitted months earlier. When Travis finally arrived drunk from celebrating a business deal, he barely looked at the plaque before saying, "That's nice, babe. But we need to stay focused on the company right now." She never submitted another design afterward. The grief of that realization hit her unexpectedly hard. Not because he ruined her career, because she helped him do it. Years of shrinking herself voluntarily to protect his ego. Savannah touched her arm gently. "You okay?" Gertrude blinked back into the present. "Yes." But something inside her had changed permanently tonight. She no longer wanted Travis back. That was the shift. Not rage, not heartbreak. Clarity. A hostess approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention toward the stage for tonight's special announcement. Applause filled the ballroom. Travis straightened confidently beside the stairs leading upward. This was his favorite environment. Admiration, power, performance. He reached for Gertrude's hand. She looked down at it calmly, then didn't take it. A tiny flicker of panic crossed his face immediately. Only she noticed. Interesting. The mighty Travis Hunt suddenly looked fragile whenever his wife stopped cooperating with the illusion. Gertrude, he whispered sharply, but she was already moving, slowly, elegantly, toward the stage. Travis frowned. What are you doing? Gertrude stepped onto the first stair, then the second. The ballroom quieted slightly in confusion. Even the musicians softened uncertainly. Travis followed quickly behind her, now smile tightening dangerously. This isn't the plan. Gertrude turned toward him beneath the crystal lights, and for the first time in years, she realized she no longer cared what his plans were. Then she walked directly toward the microphone before Travis could reach it first. The ballroom fell into confused silence as Gertrude Hunt stepped in front of the microphone. Travis stopped halfway up the stairs behind her, smile frozen painfully in place, while flashes from photographers sparkled across the room. Nobody understood what was happening yet, but wealthy people could smell tension faster than smoke. Gertrude adjusted the microphone slowly. Her hands no longer trembled. That surprised her most. For days she expected heartbreak to destroy her. Instead, clarity steadied her. Below the stage, hundreds of powerful people stared upward, waiting for another polished corporate speech. Another performance. They had no idea the woman standing before them had spent years suffocating quietly inside a beautiful cage. Gertrude smiled faintly. I wasn't planning to speak tonight. A few soft chuckles moved through the room. Travis climbed the final stair carefully and positioned himself slightly behind her. Too close. Controlling the visual narrative. Gertrude noticed everything now, but lately she continued calmly. I've been thinking a lot about loyalty. The ballroom quieted further. Travis's expression sharpened almost invisibly. Not fear yet. Concern. People love using that word in marriages, Gertrude said softly. In business, too. James Holloway exchanged a quick glance with Ethan Cole below the stage. Gertrude saw it. Good. Let them feel uncomfortable. Women spent entire lifetimes uncomfortable so powerful men could remain relaxed. No one talks enough, she continued, about how dangerous loyalty becomes when only one person is practicing it. Absolute silence now. Travis stepped closer. Gertrude, he murmured under his breath. Warning. But she kept speaking. For years I believed love meant sacrifice. Her voice remained graceful, controlled, even. But emotion threaded beneath every word now. I believed supporting someone meant shrinking yourself to protect their ambitions. Several women in the audience shifted subtly. They understood, even if the men didn't. I believed endurance was noble. Gertrude paused, then looked directly at Travis for the first time all evening. I was wrong. A ripple moved through the ballroom instantly, not dramatic, just enough, like the first crack in glass before shattering. Travis forced a tight smile and reached for the microphone lightly. Baby, maybe we should... Gertrude stepped away from his hand before he could touch it. That tiny movement hit harder than shouting ever would have. A few guests visibly stiffened, because suddenly this no longer looked like charming marital banter. It looked real. Travis's eyes darkened instantly. Gertrude turned back toward the crowd. You know what I've learned, she asked softly. Nobody answered. Women are taught that being understanding is a virtue. Her throat tightened slightly. But sometimes understanding becomes permission for people to destroy you slowly. The words hung heavily beneath the crystal chandeliers. Gertrude noticed several investors watching Travis now instead of her. Good. Let them wonder. Men like Travis survived through certainty. She intended to take that away first. Travis lowered his voice again. You're embarrassing yourself. Gertrude almost smiled. Not us. Not the marriage. Herself. Because narcissists always frame consequences as emotional instability in others. She looked at him calmly. No, she whispered softly enough that only he could hear. I think I'm finally embarrassing you. For the first time all night, genuine panic flashed across his face. Beautiful. Below the stage, Ethan Cole loosened his tie slightly. James Holloway looked deeply uncomfortable, Margaret Hunt sat frozen near the front table, horrified not by Travis's betrayal, but by public imperfection. Gertrude continued speaking. Some people build entire lives on the labor of women they quietly disrespect. The room went still again, and those women spend years believing they simply need to love harder. Her chest ached now, not from grief. From finally saying truths she buried alive inside herself. I spent a very long time apologizing for needing honesty. Her eyes swept slowly across the ballroom, across wealthy wives smiling too tightly beside emotionally absent husbands, across women who probably recognized themselves in her words more than they wanted to admit. But love without respect, Gertrude said quietly, is just emotional servitude dressed in nicer clothes. A woman near the back inhaled sharply. Travis grabbed her arm suddenly. Not violently, but firmly enough to remind her he still believed access to her body belonged to him. Enough, he hissed quietly. Gertrude looked down at his hand, then slowly back up into his eyes, and removed his grip from her arm herself. The ballroom watched everything now. Every movement, every crack. Travis smiled through clenched teeth toward the audience. My wife's been under a lot of stress recently. There it was. The oldest trick in the book. Discredit the woman emotionally before she becomes believable. Gertrude turned toward the microphone again. Yes, she said calmly. Funny how women always seem unstable right after men start fearing exposure. A stunned murmur spread through the room instantly. Travis's composure slipped visibly. Gertrude. Too late. The narrative was moving away from him, and he could feel it. For years, he controlled every room through charm and confidence. Tonight, his wife stood beside him, calmly dismantling the illusion with nothing but truth. James Holloway stood slowly from his table. That movement alone changed the energy completely. Because when powerful men became uncertain, everyone else followed. Perhaps James said carefully, this isn't the appropriate setting for personal matters. Gertrude nodded politely. You're absolutely right. Then she smiled faintly. So let's keep this professional. Travis went pale. He knew. Instantly. He knew she was about to destroy something bigger than the marriage. Gertrude faced the ballroom fully now. As of tonight, she announced calmly, I am withdrawing my personal and financial support from Hunt's strategic group until certain ethical concerns are addressed privately. The silence afterward felt catastrophic. Ethan Cole looked physically ill. Investors immediately began whispering. Phones appeared discreetly beneath tables. Travis stepped forward sharply. You can't do that. Gertrude finally looked at him with complete emotional clarity. Yes, she said softly, I can. Because her family money mattered. Her name mattered. Her connections mattered. And for the first time, Travis realized the woman he spent years minimizing was structurally holding up far more of his empire than he admitted. The room buzzed louder now. James Holloway's face hardened into pure business calculation. Risk assessment, scandal, liability. Travis saw it happening too, the shift, power leaving him molecule by molecule. Then suddenly, a voice echoed clearly from the ballroom entrance. Actually, every head turned. Savannah stood there beneath the golden lights, one trembling hand resting protectively over her visibly pregnant stomach. The entire room froze. Travis looked like all the oxygen had vanished from his lungs. Savannah's voice shook violently, but she kept speaking anyway. Are you finally going to admit our child exists, and just like that? The entire empire Travis Hunt built on image manipulation and carefully managed lies began collapsing publicly in real time. The ballroom erupted instantly. Not loudly at first. Rich people rarely exploded publicly. Instead, chaos spread in elegant whispers. Sharp inhales, half-finished champagne glasses lowering slowly, investors leaning toward each other with controlled panic. Phones glowing beneath tables. Savannah stood frozen near the entrance beneath hundreds of glittering lights, visibly trembling but refusing to back down. And Travis Hunt finally looked afraid. Real fear. Not irritation, not inconvenience, fear. Gertrude watched it happen in real time. The exact moment Travis realized he could no longer manipulate the narrative faster than truth exposed it. Savannah, he said sharply, descending the stage stairs. This is not the place. Savannah laughed bitterly through tears. Was there ever going to be a place? The question sliced through the room. Gertrude remained standing at the microphone while cameras flashed endlessly now. Some guests pretended not to stare. Others openly watched like spectators witnessing a luxury yacht split apart during a storm. Margaret Hunt stood abruptly. This woman needs to leave immediately. Of course. Not my son impregnated someone while married. Not a pregnant woman was abandoned. Just remove the evidence. Savannah visibly shrank under Margaret's disgust. Gertrude stepped down from the stage slowly and moved toward Savannah without hesitation. That single action changed the emotional balance of the room instantly, because people expected women to attack each other. Not unite. Travis saw it too, and panic deepened in his eyes. "Gertrude," he warned quietly. She ignored him completely. Savannah whispered shakily, "I'm sorry." "For what?" Gertrude asked softly. "This." Gertrude looked around the ballroom, at the men protecting reputations, at the women trained to endure humiliation gracefully, at Travis still trying to control damage instead of acknowledging pain. Then she answered calmly, "You didn't create this." Travis exhaled sharply. "Can we handle this privately?" The audacity almost stunned her. Privately, meaning silently, conveniently, without consequences. Gertrude turned toward him slowly. "You lost the right to privacy when you turned people into collateral damage." That landed hard. Several investors immediately began distancing themselves physically from Travis without even realizing it. Tiny steps backward, avoided eye contact, the social equivalent of abandoning a sinking ship. Ethan Cole approached nervously. "Maybe we should postpone the announcement." "No," Travis snapped instantly. "Nobody's postponing anything." There he was again. Even now, image first. Gertrude suddenly felt exhausted in a completely different way. Not emotionally, spiritually. How long had she spent loving someone fundamentally incapable of accountability? Travis stepped closer towards Savannah. "You need to stop causing scenes." Savannah looked stunned. "Causing scenes. You're emotional right now?" Gertrude almost laughed aloud. "Of course." A pregnant, abandoned woman confronting the father publicly became emotional instability, but a married CEO secretly cheating and manipulating women remained professionalism. Savannah's voice cracked. "You told me you loved me." Travis lowered his voice sharply. "I cared about you." The wording changed. Gertrude noticed instantly. Past tense, distancing language, strategic emotional retreat. Savannah noticed too. Pain spread visibly across her face. "No," she whispered. "You used me." Travis's patience snapped slightly. "You knew I was married. You told me your marriage was dead." His silence answered everything. The ballroom watched hungrily now. Because wealth loved morality only when scandal made it entertaining, Gertrude suddenly hated every person in the room. Not just Travis, all of them. People who overlooked cruelty for years as long as it wore a tuxedo and donated to charities. James Holloway approached carefully, voice low. "Travis, is there any truth to what's being implied here?" Implied? What a cowardly corporate word. Travis straightened immediately. This is a personal misunderstanding being weaponized publicly. Gertrude stared at him. Weaponized. Interesting. Truth became violence only when it threatened powerful men. Savannah looked physically ill now. One hand clutched her stomach tightly, the stress radiating from her terrified Gertrude. She stepped closer protectively. "We're leaving." Travis's eyes darkened instantly. "No." One word. Sharp. Possessive. Controlling. And suddenly Gertrude saw it clearly. He didn't want Savannah leaving because he feared losing control over what she might say next. Not because he cared. Never because he cared. Savannah whispered shakily, "I can't breathe again." Gertrude immediately turned toward her. "Okay." Slow breaths. Travis grabbed Gertrude's wrist suddenly, not violently enough for outrage, just firmly enough to remind her he still believed authority belonged to him. "We need to talk. Now." Gertrude looked down at his hand slowly, then back up at him. For years this grip would have intimidated her instantly. Tonight it only made something cold rise inside her chest. "Take your hand off me." His jaw tightened. "Gertrude." "Take your hand off me." People nearby had started noticing. Travis released her immediately. Public image calculations again. Always. Gertrude guided Savannah toward a quieter hallway near the ballroom entrance while voices exploded behind them. Investors questioning Ethan. Margaret blaming staff. Phones ringing. Crisis management already beginning. Perfect. Inside the marble hallway, Savannah burst into tears fully. "I ruined your life." Gertrude turned toward her sharply. "No," she said firmly. Savannah looked shattered. Yes, I did. No, Gertrude repeated. Travis ruined every woman he touched because he sees people as extensions of himself instead of human beings. The younger woman cried harder. Gertrude held her carefully while memories flooded painfully through her mind. Every apology she gave Travis for being too sensitive. Every lonely night she blamed herself for his emotional distance. Every moment she confused survival with love. Savannah whispered against her shoulder. How did you survive being married to him? Gertrude closed her eyes briefly. I don't think I did, she admitted softly. I think I disappeared slowly. That truth hurt more than infidelity itself, because affairs destroyed trust, but emotional manipulation destroyed identity. Footsteps approached rapidly. Travis. Of course. He appeared in the hallway, breathing hard fury barely controlled beneath his polished exterior. Enough, he snapped quietly. Savannah immediately stepped backward instinctively. Fear again? Gertrude hated him for that most. The fear women carried around him automatically. You are humiliating me, Travis hissed. Gertrude stared at him in disbelief. Humiliating him. Not hurting women, not abandoning responsibility, just humiliation. And suddenly something inside her broke completely free. Not heartbreak, hope. The final desperate hope that maybe somewhere inside Travis existed a decent man worth saving. There wasn't. There never had been. You know what's terrifying, Gertrude said softly. Travis frowned. Even now? You still think you're the victim? His face hardened instantly. You're turning everyone against me. No, Gertrude whispered. Your behavior is? For a second, neither moved. Then Travis finally exploded. Not loudly. Worse. Coldly. Cruelly. You were useful, he said quietly. That's not the same thing as irreplaceable. The words hit like shattered glass. Savannah gasped softly. But Gertrude? Gertrude just stared at him. Because somehow, after everything, that sentence finally told her the complete truth about her marriage. Useful. That was how Travis loved. Not deeply. Not selflessly. Functionally. And once usefulness faded, so did loyalty. A strange calm spread through her body. Not pain anymore. Release. Gertrude slowly pulled her phone from her clutch purse, then pressed record. Travis noticed too late. Travis's expression changed the second he saw the recording screen. Not guilt, calculation. His eyes narrowed instantly as he reassessed the situation in real time, like a businessman adapting to a hostile negotiation. Are you seriously recording me? He asked coldly. Gertrude held the phone steadily. Yes. Savannah stood beside her, trembling silently, one arm wrapped protectively around her stomach while distant noise from the ballroom echoed faintly down the hallway. The gala was unraveling behind them. Good. Travis stepped forward carefully. You're acting irrational? Gertrude almost smiled. There it was again. The oldest weapon he owned. Question the woman's sanity before anyone questions the man's behavior. Except this time it sounded weak. Predictable. You cheated on your wife? Manipulated a pregnant woman, hid assets, tracked my phone, and threatened both of us, Gertrude said quietly. But I'm irrational. His jaw tightened. Savannah whispered shakily, You told me nobody would believe me. Travis ignored her completely. That hurt Savannah more visibly than yelling would have. Being unseen was its own violence. Gertrude suddenly realized Travis had spent years perfecting invisibility as punishment. If women became inconvenient emotionally, he simply withdrew acknowledgement until they questioned their own worth. You need to stop talking, Travis warned softly. Gertrude stared at him. No, she answered. You just lost control of who gets to speak. Something dangerous flickered across his face then. Not sadness, not regret, rage. Because narcissists often experienced exposure as abuse. The hallway went silent for several long seconds. Then Travis exhaled sharply and straightened his tuxedo. And just like that, the charming executive mask slid back into place. Fascinating. Even now, performance came naturally. Fine, he said calmly. You want honesty? Let's be honest. Savannah looked terrified instantly. Gertrude simply watched. Travis pointed toward Savannah dismissively. She knew exactly what this was. Savannah recoiled. No, I didn't. You wanted access to my lifestyle. The cruelty of it landed heavily. Savannah looked physically wounded. Gertrude felt anger rise so fast it nearly burned through her calm, because this was what men like Travis always did. Rewrite women into opportunists the moment accountability arrived. "You rented me an apartment," Savannah whispered. "I helped you. You said you loved me." Travis rolled his eyes slightly. "I said what you needed to hear." The hallway fell dead silent. Even Savannah stopped crying for a second, because sometimes cruelty became so naked it stunned everyone around it. Gertrude looked at Travis slowly. "Do you hear yourself?" Travis turned toward her sharply. "You think you're innocent here? You benefited from my success for years." There it was. Transactional love again. Every sacrifice she made translated into debt owed back to him. "I built that success with you," Gertrude replied calmly. "No," Travis snapped. "I built it." Her chest tightened painfully. Not because his words hurt, because part of her used to believe them. Travis stepped closer now, voice colder. "You think investors care about morality? They care about confidence, stability, strength." Gertrude stared at him. "And what exactly is strength to you? Winning." The answer came too quickly, too honestly. Savannah looked horrified. Gertrude just felt tired, deeply tired. Because suddenly everything about Travis became painfully simple. There was no hidden softness, no wounded little boy beneath the arrogance, just hunger, power, image, winning, no matter who got emotionally buried underneath it. Footsteps suddenly approached from the ballroom. Rachel Whitmore appeared first, sharp-eyed, focused, completely unafraid. Behind her came Ethan Cole, looking pale and deeply unsettled. And farther back, James Holloway walked slowly beside two senior board members from Hunt's strategic group. Travis immediately stiffened. Now the real audience mattered. Rachel's eyes moved quickly between everyone before settling calmly on Gertrude. "You okay?" Such a simple question. Yet Gertrude nearly cried hearing it, because Rachel asked like the answer genuinely mattered. Not strategically, not performatively, humanly. "Yes," Gertrude answered softly. Rachel nodded once, then turned toward Travis with terrifying calm. "We need to discuss your financial disclosures." The color drained slightly from Travis's face. "I'm not doing this here." Ethan finally spoke up quietly. "You moved company funds through Hunt Strategic Holdings." Not a question, a statement. Travis looked at him sharply. "You went through private accounts." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Oh, now privacy matters to you. Interesting." Even Ethan sounded different now. Fear was shifting directions. James Holloway stepped forward slowly. "We've received allegations regarding undisclosed offshore restructuring." Allegations. Another wealthy word designed to soften ugly truths. Travis immediately straightened. "Everything I've done is legal." Rachel crossed her arms calmly. Legal and ethical aren't interchangeable. Gertrude watched Travis carefully now. This was the first environment where charm alone might not save him. Corporate power only protected people until liability threatened profits. And suddenly Travis looked exactly what he truly was, beneath the tailored suits and charisma. Cornered. He looked toward Gertrude sharply. "You're behind this." The accusation almost amused her, as if truth only existed when weaponized by enemies. "No," she said quietly. "You're behind this. We just stopped covering for you." James Holloway's expression hardened further. "Did you use marital assets as collateral without full disclosure silence?" Tiny, but catastrophic. Ethan closed his eyes briefly like he already knew the answer. Rachel spoke carefully. "That silence concerns me deeply." Travis exploded suddenly. "Oh, spare me the moral outrage. Every company in this city manipulates numbers." "There it is," Rachel said softly. "What?" "The part where you confuse common corruption with immunity." Travis laughed coldly. "You think Gertrude survives this untouched? My name protects her, too." The sentence hung heavily in the hallway. Gertrude stared at him quietly. After everything, he still believed she needed him to exist meaningfully. Rachel stepped beside Gertrude. "You really underestimated your wife." That landed harder than anything else tonight, because it was true. Travis underestimated her empathy, her intelligence, her endurance, her ability to survive him. And now, finally, he was underestimating her anger. James Holloway looked toward the board members. "We need immediate internal review." Ethan nodded slowly. "Agreed." Travis's composure cracked completely then. You're removing me based on gossip and emotional theatrics. Gertrude almost laughed. Emotional theatrics. Interesting phrase from a man whose entire identity depended on performance. One board member finally spoke carefully. This isn't about the affair anymore. No, it wasn't. That was the thing Travis failed to understand. The affair exposed character, but the financial deception revealed pattern, and patterns destroyed trust faster than scandals. Travis looked around desperately now, searching for loyalty, finding distance instead. Margaret suddenly appeared near the hallway entrance looking furious. "This woman is destroying our family," she snapped at Gertrude. Rachel answered before Gertrude could. "No," Rachel said calmly. "Your son did." Margaret looked stunned. Someone challenged her directly. Good. Women protecting toxic men created half the damage in the first place. Savannah suddenly sat down heavily against the wall, looking pale. Gertrude immediately crouched beside her. "You okay?" Savannah nodded weakly. "I'm just overwhelmed." Understandable. An entire corporate empire was imploding around her unborn child. Travis looked toward Savannah briefly, then away again. And Gertrude noticed something heartbreaking. Even now, he still didn't ask if she was okay. Not once. James Holloway finally faced Travis directly. "Until the board completes its review, you're suspended from executive authority." Silence. Total silence. Travis stared at him in disbelief. "You can't do that." James's face hardened. "We just did." And for the first time in many years, Travis Hunt looked like a man realizing power could abandon him too. 3 weeks later, the mansion finally felt quiet for the first time in years. Not peaceful, just honest. The silence no longer carried the tension of waiting for Travis's moods to determine the atmosphere of the house. No expensive cologne lingered through the hallways. No late-night phone calls behind closed office doors. No emotional landmines disguised as conversations. Just stillness. Gertrude stood in the kitchen arranging pale pink roses into glass vases while soft jazz played from the speakers overhead. Sunlight poured through the massive windows overlooking the snowy backyard. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't bracing herself emotionally. That realization alone almost made her cry. Savannah entered slowly, wearing thick socks and one of Gertrude's oversized sweaters, her pregnant stomach visibly larger now. "You've been decorating since 7 this morning," Savannah said with a small smile. Gertrude adjusted another floral arrangement carefully. "I forgot what it feels like to prepare something joyful." The words settled softly between them. Today was Savannah's baby shower. Small, private, safe. No influencers, no corporate wives pretending happiness for photographs. Just women. Real women. The kind Travis spent years dismissing because they couldn't be controlled through status. Savannah looked around nervously. "You really didn't have to do all this?" Gertrude turned toward her. "Yes," she said gently. "I really did." Because every woman deserved at least one room where she felt celebrated instead of judged. Savannah's eyes watered instantly. That happened often now. Not dramatic crying, healing crying, the kind that appeared when your nervous system finally realized danger had temporarily passed. The doorbell rang around noon. Lila Monroe entered first carrying bakery boxes and winter air behind her. The moment Gertrude saw her oldest friend for the first time in nearly 4 years, guilt hit like a physical ache. Lila looked exactly the same. Warm brown curls, sharp humor in her eyes, fiercely alive. Travis hated her almost immediately after meeting her. Now Gertrude understood why. Lila saw through him too quickly. "Oh my God," Lila whispered the second she saw Gertrude. "Look at you." Gertrude laughed nervously. "That bad?" "No," Lila said softly. "You finally look awake." The sentence nearly shattered her, because it was true. For years, Gertrude moved through life emotionally sedated, convincing herself survival was happiness. Lila pulled her into a fierce hug instantly, and suddenly Gertrude realized how deeply isolated she'd become during her marriage. Travis never directly forbade friendships. He just poisoned them slowly. "They're jealous of us. She's immature. Your friends encourage negativity." Tiny manipulations until Gertrude stopped reaching out altogether. Classic emotional abuse. Isolation disguised as maturity. More women arrived gradually through the afternoon. Rachel Whitmore, Dr. Naomi Bennett. Even Ethan Cole's ex-wife Denise unexpectedly appeared carrying a wrapped baby blanket. Savannah blinked in surprise. "You came." Denise gave a bitter laugh. "Honey, half the women in Manhattan have a Travis story." That line hung heavily in the room, because suddenly the pattern became undeniable. Men like Travis weren't anomalies. They were systems, supported by silence, protected by wealth, enabled by women taught to endure quietly. The baby shower slowly transformed into something deeper than celebration. Confession, survival, truth. At one point, Savannah sat quietly opening tiny baby clothes while the women around her shared stories in soft voices. Denise spoke first. "My ex-husband cheated on me during chemo treatments." Silence. Then Lila. "My fiancé used to apologize by buying jewelry instead of changing behavior." Rachel snorted softly. Classic narcissist economy. Emotional damage in exchange for luxury goods. A few women laughed darkly. Gertrude stayed quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I genuinely believed being loved meant becoming smaller." The room fell still. She looked down at the teacup in her hands. "I thought patience could fix emotional neglect." Rachel's voice softened slightly. "That's because women are trained to romanticize suffering." Gertrude nodded slowly. The terrifying part was how true that felt now. Movies called it devotion. Families called it compromise. Society called it loyalty. But sometimes it was just slow emotional destruction. Savannah suddenly whispered, "I still miss him sometimes." Nobody judged her. That mattered. Dr. Bennett leaned forward gently. "You miss the version of him you hoped existed." Savannah began crying quietly. Gertrude reached for her hand instantly. Because healing wasn't linear. Even abused hearts mourned illusions. Especially illusions. Later that afternoon, Gertrude carried gifts upstairs, while laughter drifted softly through the house below. The sound felt foreign here, alive. The mansion had spent years functioning like a museum. Beautiful but emotionally freezing. Now it sounded human again. As she entered the upstairs hallway, she noticed something outside the front gates. A black SUV. Her stomach tightened immediately. No. The front doorbell rang once. Heavy. Certain. Every woman downstairs went silent instantly. Gertrude descended slowly. Savannah looked frightened already. Rachel stood immediately. "I'll handle it." "No," Gertrude said quietly, because suddenly she understood something important. Fear survived through avoidance. And she was done hiding from Travis Hunt inside houses she helped pay for. Gertrude opened the front door herself. Travis stood there wearing a dark wool coat dusted with snow, and for the first time since she met him, he looked ruined. Not physically. His suit still fit perfectly. His hair remained immaculate, but the arrogance was cracked now. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His confidence looked exhausted. Behind him, paparazzi waited across the street near the gates like vultures circling something dying. News of the scandal had exploded online 3 days earlier. Headlines, financial investigations, speculation, rumors. The perfect empire finally bleeding publicly. Travis looked past Gertrude, briefly hearing women's voices inside the house. Then his eyes returned to her. "I need to talk to you, not, 'I'm sorry.'" "Never that." Gertrude crossed her arms calmly. "You lost that privilege." His jaw tightened. "Please." The word shocked her. Travis never begged. He negotiated, manipulated, persuaded, but begging implied vulnerability, and narcissists only became vulnerable when survival demanded it. "I'm serious, Gertrude." She studied him carefully. No wedding ring. Interesting. Not because he accepted divorce emotionally, because public image advisors probably told him married optics no longer benefited him. Everything about Travis remained strategic. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. He swallowed hard, then finally said the one sentence she never expected to hear from him. "I need you to help me." Not "I miss you," not "I love you." Need. Of course. Because even collapsing, Travis Hunt still came to women for emotional rescue instead of accountability. Behind Gertrude, Savannah appeared silently near the staircase. Travis glanced at her only briefly, and once again, he never asked how she or the baby were doing. Gertrude noticed. So did everyone else. And suddenly, Travis standing outside in the snow no longer looked powerful. He looked exactly what he truly was. A man who consumed love without understanding it. Snow fell softly between Gertrude and Travis like the world was trying to cover something ugly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Behind Gertrude, warmth and laughter still drifted faintly through the house. Women moved around the kitchen carrying cake plates and teacups, while Savannah sat surrounded by softness for the first time in months. Outside the doorway stood the man who poisoned all of it. Travis looked exhausted now. Not emotionally devastated, exposed. There was a difference. The newspapers had been merciless all week. Hunt strategic under federal review. CEO accused of financial misconduct. Mistress scandal rocks. Corporate empire. Anonymous sources leaked stories daily. Board members distancing themselves. Investors fleeing. Charity organizations quietly removing his name from donor lists. Gertrude watched it happen without satisfaction. That surprised her. She thought revenge would feel euphoric. Instead, it mostly felt sad, like watching someone slowly become exactly who they always were. I just want 5 minutes, Travis said quietly. Rachel appeared behind Gertrude immediately. No. Travis's eyes flicked toward her with open hostility. Stay out of this. Rachel smiled coldly. You lost the authority to command rooms anymore, remember? He ignored her and focused entirely on Gertrude again. Classic narcissism. Everyone else became background noise and less useful. Please. Again that word. Still strange hearing it from him. Gertrude stepped outside slowly and pulled the door mostly closed behind her. Rachel looked furious but allowed it. The freezing air wrapped around them instantly. Travis shoved his hands into his coat pockets. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain around her. Good. Let him experience instability for once. You look happy, he said bitterly. Gertrude almost laughed. Happy, no. Healing, maybe. There was a difference there, too. You came here to insult me? No. Then what? Travis looked toward the mansion. Windows where silhouettes moved warmly behind golden light. Something dark crossed his face. Jealousy. Not because Gertrude loved someone else, because she no longer centered him emotionally. I made mistakes, he finally muttered. The sentence landed flat. Not because it wasn't true, because it was strategically vague. Mistakes sounded accidental, not sustained, not cruel. You built entire relationships on manipulation, Gertrude replied quietly. His jaw tightened immediately. You act like I'm some monster. Gertrude stared at him calmly. Months ago, she would have softened instantly at hearing pain in his voice. Now she noticed something else. He still wasn't asking about Savannah. Or the baby, not once. Even here. Even now. What exactly do you think you are? She asked softly. That question visibly unsettled him, because narcissists relied on controlling definitions. Successful, provider, visionary, victim. Without those identities, they became frighteningly hollow. I worked hard for everything I built, and destroyed people while building it. That's not fair. Gertrude looked at him in disbelief. Fair. Interesting word from a man who secretly tracked her phone while sleeping beside her. You know what the worst part is? She asked quietly. Travis frowned. I genuinely loved you. Something flickered in his eyes then. Briefly. Almost human. I know. No, Gertrude whispered. You really don't. Silence stretched between them. The paparazzi cameras flashed faintly beyond the gates. Travis noticed too and immediately shifted posture slightly. Still performing, always. Gertrude suddenly remembered something painful, 8 years ago. A beach in Malibu after Travis closed his first major deal. They drank wine barefoot in the sand while he held her face gently and said, You're the best thing that ever happened to me. At the time, she believed him completely. Now she wondered if he even remembered saying it, or if he simply said whatever secured devotion in the moment. You isolated me from everyone, Gertrude said softly. Travis looked defensive immediately. That's not true. You made me distrust people who cared about me. I protected our marriage. No, she corrected quietly. You protected control. That landed. Hard. Travis looked away toward the snowy driveway. You think those women inside care about you? He asked bitterly. They're enjoying this? Gertrude almost smiled sadly. That was the tragedy of men like Travis. They truly couldn't comprehend love without transaction, support without leverage, kindness without agenda. They stayed, she said softly. You didn't. His expression hardened again. You're rewriting history. No, Gertrude answered calmly. I'm remembering it accurately for the first time. The wind moved between them sharply. Travis suddenly looked tired in a way she'd never seen before. Older, smaller, like power leaving him physically. I lost everything, he whispered. And there it was, finally, the real heartbreak. Not losing her, losing status, company, control, the empire. Gertrude studied him carefully. You still don't understand what you actually lost. His eyes lifted toward hers slowly. For years she feared this man's approval more than her own unhappiness. Now she looked at him and felt something almost unrecognizable. Freedom. Travis stepped closer. You can still fix this. The sentence stunned her. Even now, even after affairs, lies, investigations, emotional abuse, he still believed she existed to repair consequences for him. How she asked quietly, we make a statement, we settle things privately, we rebuild, we... Fascinating. That word only appeared when he needed labor. What about Savannah? Gertrude asked. He hesitated. Too long. Then finally, I'll take financial responsibility. Gertrude closed her eyes briefly. Financial responsibility, not emotional responsibility, not fatherhood, not remorse, just management, a transaction. When she opened her eyes again, something inside her felt completely finished, not dramatic, peaceful, like a wound finally closing after years of infection. You know what's incredible, she whispered. Travis frowned slightly. You still think this conversation is about saving your life? His face darkened. Don't do that. Do what talk to me like I'm evil. Gertrude looked at him quietly, then finally said the truth she'd spent years avoiding. I think you're empty. The words hit harder than shouting ever could have. Travis physically recoiled slightly. Good. Because emptiness terrified narcissists more than accusations. They could defend against anger, but not recognition. Inside the house, laughter erupted faintly again. Savannah's laughter. Soft, uncertain, healing. Travis heard it too, and for the first time since arriving, he glanced toward the sound with something resembling resentment. Not guilt, not tenderness. Resentment that life continued without him at the center. Gertrude noticed instantly. Of course she did. She saw everything now. Travis's voice lowered dangerously. You'll regret humiliating me. There it was. The real him. Not broken husband. Threatened ego. Gertrude nodded slowly. Thank you. He blinked. What? For finally saying something honest. Silence. Then slowly, deliberately, Gertrude reached for her left hand. Travis watched in confusion as she slid off her wedding ring. 10 years of marriage. Gone in one smooth movement. Snowflakes landed softly against the diamond. Gertrude stared at the ring for one final second. All the loneliness attached to it. All the performances. All the years she abandoned herself trying to earn love from someone incapable of giving it properly. Then she placed it into Travis's hand. His fingers closed around it automatically. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely shaken. Not because he loved her deeply, because possession was ending. Gertrude stepped backward toward the house. Warmth glowed behind her, safety, women, healing. Travis stood alone in the snow holding the symbol of a marriage he destroyed with his own hands. And suddenly he no longer looked powerful at all. He looked like what he truly was, a man nobody wanted anymore. The divorce hearing began the same morning Savannah went into labor. Rain hammered against the courthouse windows in lower Manhattan, while reporters crowded outside beneath umbrellas shouting questions every time black SUVs arrived at the curb. Gertrude stepped from Rachel's car wearing a cream wool coat and calm expression. No wedding ring, no fear. Cameras flashed instantly. Gertrude, did Travis Hunt hide company assets? Are the FBI allegations true? Did he father a child during the marriage? Rachel guided her through the chaos smoothly. No comments. Inside the courthouse, everything smelled like polished wood wet coats and expensive tension. Gertrude sat beside Rachel at the long conference table while Travis entered from the opposite side with his attorneys. For a moment the room fell completely silent. He looked different now. Still handsome, still impeccably dressed, but diminished somehow. The arrogance remained, yet it flickered unevenly now beneath exhaustion and public humiliation. Power had started abandoning him visibly. Gertrude noticed something else too. He avoided looking directly at her. Interesting, not shame. People like Travis rarely felt shame deeply, but he hated seeing evidence of lost control. Rachel opened several folders methodically. For the record, she said calmly, We are requesting full forensic disclosure of all hidden accounts connected to Hunt Strategic Holdings. Travis's attorney immediately objected. Those allegations remain unproven. Rachel smiled coldly. So did Watergate once. Gertrude almost laughed. Across the table, Travis rubbed his jaw tensely. This was the first environment where charisma meant absolutely nothing. Courts cared about documents, patterns, evidence, not charm. The judge entered moments later and the proceedings began. Gertrude listened quietly while financial reports, offshore transfers, hidden assets, and suspicious restructuring filled the room with ugly truths. Every new detail felt surreal, not because she doubted them anymore, because she realized how much deception she survived without fully seeing. At one point, the judge looked directly at Travis. "Did your wife have knowledge of these accounts?" No, Travis answered stiffly. The honesty almost shocked her. Maybe because lying under oath threatened consequences he finally couldn't manipulate away. Rachel leaned forward smoothly. "So you knowingly concealed marital assets while engaging in extramarital relationships that created additional financial liabilities?" Travis's jaw tightened instantly. The room went silent. "Answer the question, Mr. Hunt." "Yes." The word landed heavily. Gertrude expected triumph. Instead, she felt grief, because hearing betrayal confirmed publicly still hurt differently than discovering it privately. Years together reduced to legal language, concealed assets, infidelity, emotional misconduct. Meanwhile, somewhere across Manhattan, Savannah sat 9 months pregnant, waiting anxiously for updates. Gertrude checked her phone during recess. No messages yet. Good. Rachel handed her coffee quietly. "You're doing well?" Gertrude stared down at the paper cup. "Why does this still feel awful?" Rachel's expression softened slightly. "Because healthy people don't stop loving overnight." That hurt, because it was true. Gertrude no longer wanted Travis back, but part of her still mourned the future she imagined with him before reality destroyed it. Across the courtroom, Travis suddenly approached during recess, despite his attorneys trying to stop him. "Can we talk privately, Rachel?" Immediately stood. "No, it's 2 minutes." Gertrude looked at him carefully, then nodded once. Rachel hated it, but stepped back reluctantly. Travis lowered his voice immediately. "You're enjoying this." Gertrude stared at him in disbelief. "You genuinely think this is enjoyable? You wanted to destroy me." "No," she answered quietly. "I wanted you to stop destroying other people." His face hardened. "You could have handled this differently." That almost made her laugh. Women were always expected to handle male betrayal gracefully enough to preserve male dignity. "How exactly should I have handled it?" she asked softly. "Smiled prettier while you dismantled my life?" Travis exhaled sharply. "You know I never meant to hurt you." Gertrude looked at him for a long moment, then finally asked the question sitting inside her chest for weeks. "Did you ever actually love me? For the first time?" Travis hesitated. Not strategically. Genuinely. And somehow that hurt more than if he answered immediately. "I cared about you." There it was again. Care, not love, not devotion, not partnership, management, attachment, convenience. Gertrude nodded slowly. "Thank you." His brows furrowed. "For what?" "For finally telling the truth without decorating it." A court officer interrupted before he could answer. "Mr. Hunt, we're resuming." Travis stepped back reluctantly, and suddenly his phone rang loudly. He glanced down, then froze. Gertrude's stomach dropped instantly. "Savannah." He answered quickly. What silence. Then the color drained completely from his face. Gertrude stood immediately. "What happened?" Travis looked stunned. "She's in labor." Everything changed instantly. The courtroom, the divorce, the scandal. None of it mattered suddenly. Gertrude grabbed her coat immediately. Rachel blinked. "Wait, she's alone." And that was enough. An hour later, Gertrude rushed through the maternity ward at Mount Sinai Hospital while nurses moved urgently around her. Rainwater soaked the hem of her coat. Her pulse thundered violently. Room 614. She found Savannah crying in a hospital bed, gripping the rails tightly while contractions ripped through her body. Fear filled the room like smoke. The second Savannah saw Gertrude, she burst into tears. "You came. Always." Gertrude moved beside her instantly and grabbed her hand. "I'm here." Savannah cried harder, because trauma taught people to expect abandonment eventually, especially from the people they needed most. Hours blurred together afterward. Pain, doctors, breathing, monitors beeping steadily. Dr. Naomi Bennett guided Savannah calmly through contractions, while Gertrude stayed beside her the entire time, not once leaving, not once checking where Travis was. And interestingly, he never arrived. Not during labor, not during delivery, not once. That truth settled quietly into the room, too. Savannah screamed through another contraction, gripping Gertrude's hand painfully hard. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Gertrude whispered fiercely. "You already survived him. This part creates life." The words seemed to steady Savannah somehow. Hours later, just after midnight, a baby cried. Sharp, tiny, alive. The sound shattered something open inside Gertrude's chest instantly. Savannah sobbed uncontrollably as nurses placed the newborn girl against her chest. "Oh my God." Gertrude stood beside the bed crying silently too. Not from sadness, relief. A new life entered the world untouched by Travis's manipulations, untouched by shame, untouched by silence. Dr. Bennett smiled warmly. "She's healthy." Savannah looked overwhelmed, beautifully overwhelmed. Then she lifted tear-filled eyes toward Gertrude. "Will you hold her?" The question nearly broke her. Carefully, Gertrude took the newborn into her arms. Tiny fingers curled instinctively against her skin. Warmth spread through her chest so suddenly she almost couldn't breathe. The baby blinked slowly beneath the soft hospital lights, completely unaware of the chaos surrounding her arrival. Gertrude stared down at the little girl and felt something heal quietly inside her. Not motherhood exactly, something deeper. The understanding that love could still exist without pain attached to it. Savannah smiled weakly through tears. "What do I do now?" Gertrude looked at the baby sleeping against her chest, then back at Savannah. And softly, with more certainty than she'd felt in years, she whispered, "Now we make sure nobody ever abandons her again." 6 months later, Gertrude stood barefoot in sunlight instead of fear. The old mansion was gone, sold quietly in early spring. She didn't cry while signing the papers. That surprised everyone except Rachel. People only mourn prisons when they mistake them for homes, Rachel had said afterward. Now Gertrude lived in a restored brownstone overlooking the Connecticut shoreline, where salt air drifted through open windows and laughter existed without tension attached to it. The house wasn't larger than the mansion, but it felt infinitely bigger, because nobody controlled the emotional temperature inside it anymore. On the first floor, women's voices floated softly through the hallways, while volunteers arranged fresh flowers near the entrance. Above the doorway hung a brass plaque, the Harbor House, a transitional home for women rebuilding after emotional and financial abuse. Gertrude traced her fingers lightly over the engraved letters every morning before opening the doors. Not because she needed reminding, because survival deserved witnesses. Inside the communal kitchen, Savannah bounced baby Grace gently against her shoulder while trying to drink coffee before it got cold. Motherhood exhausted her, but differently than heartbreak had. This exhaustion came wrapped in meaning. Grace blinked sleepily beneath tiny pink headphones while soft jazz played through the speakers. "You're staring again," Savannah teased. Gertrude smiled faintly from the counter where she reviewed architectural sketches. Real sketches? Her sketches. For the first time in nearly a decade, she was designing professionally again. Community spaces, women's shelters, recovery housing, places built intentionally for emotional safety instead of performance. "I still can't believe she exists," Gertrude admitted softly. Savannah looked down at the baby instantly with tearful affection. "She saved me." "No," Gertrude corrected gently. "You saved yourself." That mattered. Because women spent too much of life waiting to be rescued instead of recognizing their own survival. Grace suddenly yawned dramatically. Both women laughed. The sound echoed warmly through the house. Months ago, Gertrude believed healing would feel explosive, victorious. Instead, it arrived quietly, in ordinary mornings, in peaceful silence, in no longer apologizing for existing. The front door opened moments later and Lila entered carrying pastries, while Rachel argued into Bluetooth headphones beside her. If he wanted mercy, he shouldn't have committed fraud, Rachel snapped before ending the call. Savannah raised an eyebrow. Travis Rachel tossed her coat over a chair. Federal investigation expanded. Nobody spoke for a second. Not because they felt guilty, because hearing his name still carried emotional residue. Trauma left fingerprints. Gertrude returned calmly to her sketches. How bad? Rachel grabbed coffee. Very. Apparently, Ethan Cole cooperated fully with investigators after securing immunity. Several executives testified too. Financial misconduct, hidden accounts, tax violations. The empire finally collapsed completely. Gertrude waited for satisfaction. But it never arrived the way revenge fantasies promised, because watching someone self-destruct rarely healed what they broke inside you. He called again yesterday, Savannah admitted quietly. Gertrude looked up immediately. What did he want? Savannah laughed bitterly. To discuss visitation rights now that the press cooled down. Of course. Public image again. Fatherhood as reputation repair. Did you answer, Savannah? Looked toward Grace, sleeping peacefully against her chest. No. Good. Some doors deserve permanent locks. A volunteer entered the kitchen nervously moments later. Gertrude, there's someone asking for you outside. Gertrude frowned slightly. Who? The volunteer hesitated. He says you know him. Something cold slid quietly through her chest. Not fear anymore. Just recognition. Outside, the ocean wind moved through the trees while gulls circled above the shoreline. Travis stood near the curb wearing a dark coat, hands shoved into his pockets. For a moment, Gertrude barely recognized him. Not because he looked older, because he looked ordinary. No assistants, no luxury car, no audience. Just a man standing alone beside a sidewalk. He turned when she approached, and suddenly Gertrude understood something shocking. Power had been his personality. Without status around him, he seemed strangely unfinished. You found the place, she said calmly. I saw an article. Of course. The Harbor House had quietly gained attention online after helping several women leave financially abusive relationships. Gertrude crossed her arms loosely. What do you want? Travis looked toward the building behind her. Women moved through the windows carrying laundry baskets and coffee mugs, while Grace's faint crying echoed somewhere inside. A living space, not a performance. You really built this, he said quietly. Yes. He nodded slowly. For years, Travis dismissed Gertrude's emotional intelligence as weakness. Now entire lives were healing because of it. Irony had teeth sometimes. They froze almost everything he admitted. No greeting, no apology, straight into loss. Still fundamentally himself. Gertrude waited silently. I might go to prison. There it was. The thing finally terrifying enough to crack his composure fully. She studied him carefully. This man once controlled every emotional corner of her life. Now she felt almost nothing standing in front of him except distance. Not hatred, freedom. I didn't come here to fight, Travis said. Then why did you come? For the first time since she met him? He looked genuinely uncertain. Then quietly, almost painfully, he asked, was I really that bad? The question stunned her, not because it was emotional, because it revealed something tragic. Travis truly spent his entire life avoiding self-awareness. Gertrude looked at him for a very long moment. Then answered honestly, I think you were a man who confused being admired with being loved. Silence. Ocean wind moved between them softly. You made women feel invisible? She continued quietly. And the worst part is, I don't think you even noticed you were doing it. Travis looked down. For once, no immediate defense came. No manipulation, no performance, just emptiness. Gertrude suddenly understood something sad. People like Travis often destroyed others because nobody ever taught them how to exist without consuming affection constantly. But understanding damage didn't erase it. You were the best thing in my life, Travis whispered. The sentence arrived too late. Years too late. Gertrude smiled sadly. No, she said gently. I was the best thing carrying your life. That truth settled heavily between them. Inside the house, Grace started crying louder now. Savannah's voice floated softly through an open window, comforting her. Travis looked toward the sound instinctively, then finally asked the question he should have asked months ago. How is the baby? Gertrude stared at him quietly. Interesting. Growth arrived eventually, sometimes only after losing absolutely everything. She's loved, Gertrude answered. And somehow that was the most important thing in the world. Travis nodded slowly. Then without another word, he turned and walked away down the sidewalk alone. Gertrude watched him disappear into the gray afternoon light, feeling no desire to follow, because closure wasn't getting revenge. Closure was no longer needing the person who hurt you to become someone different before you allowed yourself peace. Behind her, harbor house glowed warmly beside the ocean. Inside waited women rebuilding themselves. Inside waited friendship, safety, grace, life. Gertrude placed a hand against the brass plaque beside the front door and smiled softly. Kindness had never been her weakness. She had simply forgotten that kindness also needed boundaries. And now, finally, she remembered. Sometimes the most painful part of betrayal is not losing the person you loved. It's realizing how much of yourself you lost trying to keep them. Gertrude spent years believing love meant patience, sacrifice, forgiveness, and endurance. Like so many people, she confused survival with devotion. She kept shrinking herself to protect someone who never truly protected her in return. And that's what emotional manipulation does so quietly. It convinces kind people that asking for honesty is selfish, that having needs is weakness, and that staying silent is maturity. But healing began the moment she stopped asking, "How do I save this relationship?" and started asking, "Why am I abandoning myself to keep it alive?" That question changed everything. This story reminds us that being a good person does not mean tolerating disrespect. Loving deeply does not require destroying your self-worth. And sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is walk away from the life she once begged to keep. What makes Gertrude powerful in the end is not revenge. It's awareness. It's boundaries. It's learning that kindness becomes truly beautiful only when it exists alongside self-respect. And maybe the most healing part of all is this: broken people are not impossible to rebuild. Sometimes losing everything toxic is exactly what allows a person to finally find peace, purpose, genuine love, and the version of themselves they buried for years just to survive. If this story touched you in any way, let it be a reminder that you deserve honesty, safety, and a love that does not require you to disappear to maintain it. And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after heartbreak, betrayal, or emotional manipulation, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone tonight. Don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories about healing, strength, self-worth, and finding light again after the darkest chapters of life.